Welcome along to a very special emergency episode of NBL Now. It's not often that we get together at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning to talk about breaking news, but it has just happened. The Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, after a 0-5 start to their NBL 25 campaign, have parted ways with their coach, Mike Kelly. I'm Jack Heverin. Derek Rucker's in Sydney. Pete Hooley taking it all in as well. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you. Are we shocked?
Pete, I'm not shocked at all. I think we both anticipated this move, and I've said it numerous times, and it's yet to be proven that it's not true. Whatever is deemed to be inevitable, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. And now one could make the argument that it should have been done in the offseason.
Yeah, the inevitability side of this, I think, is what everybody saw coming. And again, this is how it works in pro sports when a club's not succeeding the right way, right? Firstly, it's okay, let's change the lineup a little bit. The heat comes first on a couple of star players. The heat then comes on the head coach. Then, okay, let's try and tinker with the lineup. And if normally that gets a couple of games out of that, and then inevitably the head coach ends up having to make way. So it's always tough to be a head coach when you can sometimes be scapegoated. But we can sit here, Ruck and Jack and everybody else, to put the entire 0-5 start for the Phoenix on Mike Kelly's shoulders 100% is just not the case. There is no way that he should be shouldering all the blame for this. This is just what comes with teams not reaching their potential, and you're a head coach.
Let me read the statement that's been issued just a few minutes ago from Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. Says the team's on-court performance is not meeting the club's standards and expectations. While we deeply respect, appreciate, and thank Mike for his hard work and dedication, we believe a change is necessary to move the team forward and deliver the success to our fans, sponsors, and stakeholders. That comes from the General Manager of Basketball Operations, Simon Mitchell. Tommy Greer also in that press release as well. Is he unlucky? Or is this... Let's just explore how we got to here.
Well, let's look at last night's game. Let's look at his final act. It was an act of desperation, I felt, to put Nathan Sobey on the bench. I thought it was a bad move, given the context of the game, Pete, and who they were playing against. Nathan Sobey's a highly talented player, and he features and factors in all of this as well, in that he draws so much attention because of the polarizing nature of who he is as a player. So Kelly decides to bring Sobey off the bench against the Brisbane Bullets, knowing all of the stuff that's been going on all week between these two programs. Pete, I thought that was a really bad move. I thought Sobey came out and looked neutered. He looked rushed. It just looked really bad. I would have rather started Sobey. And if this is my last game as a coach to prove myself, I'm going down blazing, and I'm going to just back Sobey and go with it. Obviously, I'm measuring this all up in hindsight. It's a bit easier to do, but my initial emotional response when I saw that Sobey was coming off the bench, I had an uneasy feeling about it.
One of the points you make there, Ruck, is where I'm at, where if they win that game last night, is Mike Kelly the coach still, and for how much longer?
Probably.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? So it's how much longer would they have gone down this path for if they get one win against a Brisbane team that only just got their first win? So in my mind, I feel like this was inevitable, as you said, coming for a while, and whether it was the next loss was going to be the decision, the final thing that gets taken away from him. It kind of looked like the way that things were going, that the conversation might have already been started where, hey, things are looking great here. And, you know, often coaches are told, players are told, like, there's a couple of games left to really save it, as you said, Ruck. But that's where it looked at. And as I said, to putting all the blame on Mike when you've got a roster that's trying to figure it all out, 9 new faces, how they mesh. And you talk about Sobey, but I want to talk about Geordie Hunter. The pressure that Geordie Hunter has on his shoulders to try and deliver and look after the centre position on his own all season long is incredibly hard. They put that on there from the start. And again, all these other pieces trying to make way and figure it all out. As I said, there's a whole lot of other things they've got to fix if they want to turn this season around.
Well, Pete, look at the numbers. They're last in the league in in total rebound percentage, okay? They're second to last in defensive rating. Those things right there, you know what they get you a lot of? L's. And this has been the way they've been trending now for the past 15 to 20 games. And this is why they've only won like 2 or 3 of the past 20 contests. And not all of that is coaching. Not all of it is strategy. A lot of that comes down to the players and that roster saying, you know what? I'm stopping my man. I'm getting that ball. And this is a danger period for this franchise, right? Because players can sit back and see and say to themselves, see, it wasn't about me. It was the coach. No, he is the fall guy for this because the buck stops with him. But players, you have a high degree of responsibility in failing your coach also.
So is it the right call?
Oof. I think it is. Again, when you're staring down the barrel of 0-5, and last year is an asterisk because Mike Kelly can't control players' hamstrings. Mike Kelly can't control the injuries that were going on when players are getting hurt and everything they had going on. But there was that review period, right, around the club of trying to figure things out and go forward. So when you've gone through all of that and then vow we're going to go in a different direction. And again, Jay, we sat here and looked at the pieces individually they were requiring. And I was like, this looks like a fun roster that's going to be able to put things together. So as Ruck said, as we've seen in every single pro sport, when all that happens and there's some positive signs, but then you start 0-5, and then again, that final loss is against a team that's really struggling as well, that's the next move in line. But also, as Ruck said, now it's on the players too, right? You can't just sit there and think, okay, that was our issue, Mike's gone. Things have got to give, and they've got to turn around, and I think their next game's a throwdown, so that's going to make it even more interesting.
Good luck. They've got Melbourne next Sunday. So, Ruck, we touched on this a little bit in moments that mattered on Monday morning, and we pondered whether it was already broken. And if you watch last night's game, to me, it only strengthens my thought that perhaps it is broken because Derek Walton Jr. is not the same player that we saw a couple of years ago. As Pete rightly pointed out, Geordie Hunter is one man taking on all of the opposition on his own. Nathan Sobey has not worked out in any way, shape or form how to play within this system or is choosing not to play within this system. Either way, take your pick. Angus Glover's gone backwards. Joe Wieskamp can't fit in. Matt Hurt's the only positive out of Southeast Melbourne to come out of this season so far. So how do they fix it, or is it too far gone?
It's interesting how the next coach starts to look at repairing the damage, okay? I think there are some minutes allocation problems. And again, if you get back to Sobey, I'd start Sobey, okay? So I'm starting there. I don't think I'm changing the starting lineup that much. I think, Pete, I'm probably going with Walton Jr., Sobey, Glover, Hurt, Hunter. I'm going with that. That's my 5. And I need you guys going to play the first 6 minutes of the game. We need to start developing some continuity and some set rotation so guys know what their role is. I want some more clarity. But then know this. This is all built around this. If you do not play hard every possession, you're getting your ass out of the game. That is the caveat for breaking the rotations. If you mess up, if you let me down, if you let your teammates down, you're coming out.
I'm going one step further with the starting change. I don't mind the idea of Sobey coming off the bench, but I'm having Sobey and Wieskamp come off the bench going forward. And I'm starting. Malik Lewis looked great, I thought, last night in his starting minutes. So I'm going with Walton Jr., Lewis, and you can either throw Glover at the 3 or move Lewis to the 3 and put Foxwell at the 2 if you want a defensive spark. And then Matt Hurt and Geordie Hunter. And then when you make the subs, you're going to have those couple off the bench that come in Sobey and Wieskamp to try and make things happen. But I don't mind the idea of trying to give Sobey a different look. I think we've seen with Walton Jr., they've spoke about it, the camaraderie, they're trying to get the chemistry, and it just hasn't worked right now. So that's for Sam McKinnon as the interim coach to have to try and figure out. But a lot of that to try and figure out in the season is really hard. And luckily they have got some time before that throwdown game, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Let's talk about the other glaring discussion point out of this, and that is what else was happening or should happen potentially now that Mike Kelly's gone. Because as you rightly point out, Pete, it can't just be leveled wholly and solely on Mike. What happens to Tommy Greer as CEO? What happens to Simon Mitchell as the general manager of basketball operations? Does there need to be greater change within this organization?
Well, Pete, I'm going to say what so many people are asking or inquiring about around the country, hell, even around the globe. Who's in charge? Who's making the ultimate decisions down in Southeast Melbourne? We brought Simon Mitchell back in, and who's the boss of who? Like, that would be really confusing for me trying to assess and evaluate how things are going. I don't know. I would like to see the hierarchy, the organizational structure. And then ultimately, how are decisions being made? And I think it's hard for us on the outside to really know how it all goes down. But if things don't improve over the balance of the season, I would say the next in line would have to be Tommy Greer. I would say that his little dish has moved into Mike Kelly's spot under the microscope. And now it comes down to, can Tommy lift it up from here?
And that's spot on, Rock, in terms of just because Mike Kelly is now gone, that doesn't mean that the heat is off the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. If anything, it just moves the magnifying glass or the microscope onto the next, because this next period now is all about, you talk about decisions. Their decisions they make and the way that the team performs from here on out is going to tell us a lot about what's to play out throughout the rest of this season. And a lot of that, one, is going to be on court in the short term with Sam McKinnon as the interim coach, but then that next coaching decision with everything what happened in the off-season with names that were been floated around, that's going to be a deciding factor as well. So they have got some time to play with, but as I said, just because Mike Kelly is gone now, that doesn't mean the microscope's off.
Pete, do you think this thing can be salvaged? I mean, they still have 23 games left. They're probably low on confidence. And Sam, Sam's been in this position before. He resurrected briefly Brisbane's fortunes during that mess of a season. I think he's capable and he's talented enough, but it's like, how much surgery is required over the next few days to get this team ready for that throwdown game?
Well, I'll throw a question back at you. Ask, is it salvageable? What would deem it to be salvageable? Trying to make the play-in tournament when you start 0-5, or trying to just get over 500 as soon as possible? Where is that line where you say, okay, things have turned around? If they win 2 of their next 4, is that salvageable?
Over the course of the season, I would say 10 victories would be solid. And obviously, if you did an Illawarra like last year and got yourself into a play-in situation, now we know that's bordering on miraculous. But I think right now we're starting to see better basketball quarter after quarter, better body language from your bench. I thought, Jack, up at the Blitz, I saw bad body language on that Southeast Melbourne bench. And it's like, guys, are you down for this program? Are you down for each other? Because if you're not, let me know. But I need to see some visible signs that we're all in this together and we're going to battle together.
What happens next from the coaching standpoint is really interesting, Pete. So Sam McKinnon, as we say, will look after things in the interim. There's no certainty that Sam coaches the season out. They may find someone sooner rather than later. But some of the names that are potentially available, I mean, we just go straight there because we tend to do this at the moment. But Chase Buford's available. That's a pretty good starting point.
Well, it is. And again, I mean, there's no better track record in the NBL than coming in and winning twice. So I'd be picking up the phone, absolutely, and just saying, hey, Chase, what are you up to? Any thoughts on potentially coming back? And again, if he opens the door and says, look, I'm not closing the door on that, then you say, what we have, can you work with? That's the question you've got to ask with, because whatever coach you go and get, if they don't think they've got the right pieces to work with, then you're setting them up for failure in the future anyway. There are some names out there. I mean, Trevor Gleeson was the one that was floated in the offseason, but now that he's already signed and locked away, that becomes nearly impossible, I think, to try and get him in the short term. But talking to some people around, I mean, Mitch Creek on Overtime before was saying that everyone wants to throw Joey Wright's name in there because of what he got out of Nathan Sobey in Adelaide. I don't know if Joey Wright wants to come back into the NBL, especially at the Phoenix for right now, but you think about a team that needs to be pulled in line, as Ruck's saying, and needs to be held accountable. Joey Wright is that guy, but also Chase Buford is that guy. They're the main 2 guys who aren't going to accept anything less than what's required. So anything in that aspect would be great, but there's plenty of other guys out there I think they'll have to pick up the phone. And as you said, the next decision on that is the most important one for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix.
Do you have to go with someone who's proven, Ruck? So I think of someone like Jacob Chance, for example, who's Dean Vickerman's right-hand man, has been involved in the Australian program under Brian Gorgent, Rob McKinlay out of the COE potentially as well, just to name a couple. But they are untried. Is that too risky in this situation to go with a first-time coach?
Well, this leads us into an uncomfortable space because you would like to have some type of engagement and perspective from your players as to who they feel might work. But yet right now your players don't really have any equity because they haven't been doing anything on the court. But it's tough to balance it. So who do you go to in that playing group and kind of bounce ideas off of that you can trust and respect in terms of trying to gauge if a prospective coach is going to be the right fit? I don't think you can go to anyone on the roster for various reasons. And I'm not, being vicious to any particular person's character. It's just the nature of the beast right now. So again, the onus falls upon the decision makers to get this selection right. And what type of coach is it? I don't think you can go with a new guy. You've got to go with somebody that commands respect from the moment he walks through the door. And players understand, oh, this feels different. This is real. I better snap my head back into position and get my game on. Otherwise, things are going to get real ugly for me here. This is what 0-5 brings.
There were rumours and suggestions of Trevor Gleeson, as you mentioned, Pete, in the offseason. Brian Goorjian's name was also mentioned, that the honeymoon or the fairy tale story of Brian coming back to southeast Melbourne was real for a little bit there. We're all experts in hindsight, but did they get it wrong by not pulling the trigger in the offseason?
Without being behind the closed doors and understanding exactly how those negotiations went and exactly what was said, it's, as you said, genius in hindsight. You look at a coach who's now gone after 5 games and the GOAT was sitting there available, and Trevor Gleeson, with his record, was sitting there available. If it came out that they were very close to getting those, and I don't think any team, if they had 3 choices of that, wouldn't really entertain Trev or Gorge with their track record. I understand that. So it is easy now to sit back and say what went wrong there. But as I said, it's hard to look back now when you're just trying to figure out what's next. And I think I agree with Ruck where you need to bring in a head coach. And you look at when they started, they brought in Simon Mitchell, who was an assistant coach under Dean Vickerman. He was our assistant coach at Melbourne United when we won a championship with Mike Kelly, and they were unbelievable in their roles. And then when Simon parted ways, Mike came in, and Mike's been a head coach, assistant coach, head coach, assistant coach. So I think they need to bring in that legitimate head coach, as Ruck said, is very important, who demands respect but also will hold players accountable, where if you see any dip in attitude or any dip in not meeting the standards on the floor, it could be the first play of a game when they come in, then they sit down. It's very simple to try and figure that out. Then you set that tone with every single player and really hope that the players buy in. And you try and turn something around in this season. The beauty of it all is that there is a play-in tournament now that all you're gunning for is 6th spot. If we had a top 4 this season to ride off and you're looking towards next year, all you've got to do is try and make 6th spot, which changes all the history record books about teams starting on 5 and trying to make the play-in.
Last one is Mike Kelly before we finish up. And I speak on behalf of all of us, not only the 3 of us, but Australian basketball. There's been so many comments and discussions, and it all centers around Mike's a great guy, but, and then there was the but, and they've gone and made the decision, so they've taken the but out of the equation. What happens next for him? I hope he's not lost to Australian basketball. As you say, Pete, he's done some great work as assistant coaches in a couple of programs.
I think it's right, because there's not that many jobs around, Pete. There are 10 teams, and there's probably 25 to 30 really good jobs available, and we're mid-season. Now, Mike's advantage is that he's got a great network back in the USA. So there's opportunities there, I'm sure, for him in the college game. Also, with the prevalence now of Australian-based coaches finding jobs in Asia, in Japan, I think certainly via his network again, there's an opportunity for him to go off and coach. And again, it doesn't mean that he's a terrible coach or he's an untalented basketball coach. Sometimes, our league is so tricky. We've seen guys with better resumes as head coaches fail here. And, this just was not the place for Mike Kelly. And I'm sure his coaching career is not over. He'll go on to something where he's definitely appreciated, and he'll do a good job.
Yeah, I really hope it's not lost to Australian basketball in particular. And I can only speak from experience when he was our assistant at Melbourne United, and he was unbelievable in that role because he made players who were on the bench or whoever the guards were who were dealing with Mike Kelly, he was the one that I especially felt most comfortable with picking up the phone and calling if I had issues with trying to figure something out. And whether it was individuals or watching film, the way that he saw the game unfold made me always feel very comfortable knowing that I had someone to turn to. Where as a rookie, I don't want to pick up the phone and call Dean Vickerman at times. I'm not there yet. I'm 5 games into my professional career. And I really respected and appreciated that from Mike when I looked back after the success we had that year. So that's where I look at it. It was like the next teams that want to try and compete for a championship, he's the perfect piece to have around for that, for the playing group to do that. And I looked at that and thinking that role there is a lot harder than to go and then manage 12 players who all have different personalities and all have different things they've got to figure out. That's why when people, I think Alice Kudek was saying on the call on Thursday, Pete, you should be a head coach. No, thank you. But it is very hard, and it is very hard to sometimes make that jump when you excel at what you've done in the past, which he's shown he's done that. And I look at a lot of assistants who have jumped up to head coaches recently in the NBL. More often than not, it hasn't worked out. The only one that's really worked out and then become the blueprint, if you want to call it that, is Adam Ford. And what he went up to Cairns and said, he said, you know what? I know what the jump is to be a head coach, but screw that. I'm doing it my own way in this small market team. And he did it his own way. And not everyone can do that considering where they're at, whether it's a big club in Melbourne or like that. So that's very asterisk. That's a very anomaly for that. Besides that, I really hope we don't lose him because he's just tremendous in the Australian basketball history.
Big 24 hours for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. It continues tomorrow morning. They have a press conference scheduled for mid-morning. So keep your eyes on that. Of course, nbl.com.au for all the latest news and all of the takeaways from that press conference. D-Ruck will be back tomorrow morning for Moments That Matter. Enjoy Kudos Bank Arena this afternoon.
Certainly will, Jack. And Hool's great sharing the time with you, my man.
You just never know in this league what is going to happen next. Thanks for being with us on a special emergency edition of NBL Now.